Hello YouTube, Sidekick here in my trusty OG Hawg, the A10A. A little bit of an interesting video for you today. Today's video actually came about because of a comment on my Discord channel. A viewer asked if I was going to be making some videos about how to deal with various kinds of threats as part of my How to Drop Bombs in DCS series. And I do plan to do that, but it did get me thinking about the topic. Specifically, it got me thinking about, historic matchups between aircraft and air defense systems. Specifically, I thought it would be interesting to go and see how DCS models some of those classic matchups, like, the F-4 versus the SA-2 in Vietnam, or the F-4 and the A-4 versus the SA-6 and the Shilka in the Yom Kippur War, or maybe even the F-4, the F-15, and the F-16 versus the SA-6 in Operation Mole Cricket in Lebanon in 1982. But a lot of those classic matchups, I realize we don't yet have all the aircraft we'd like to have, at least not at the fidelity we would wish for. It occurred to me, though, that one of the matchups we could try would be the matchup between the A-10A and the systems that it was expected to encounter over the forward edge of battle area in northwest Europe. Now, those systems did evolve over time, but I think we can sort of cover the meat of the A-10's history by looking at the matchup in, say, the late 1970s or early 1980s. On the one side, we have the A-10A, and on the other, we basically have three different systems that would have been deployed with forward Soviet assault elements, because that's what the A-10A was designed to operate against. So we're not thinking about any of the integrated air defense system in depth in this case. Now, those systems would have been the ZSU-23-4 Shilka, which was a self-propelled AAA unit, the SA-8 Gecko, or OSA, which is a short-range radar-guided missile system, and the SA-9 Gaskin, or Strela, which is an IR-guided missile system. As I said, these three systems were the principal ones that were deployed with frontline Soviet formations in northwest Europe. They were assigned at the Motor Rifle Regiment and Motor Rifle Battalion level. Generally, the Shilka and the Gaskin would have been deployed with the leading motor rifle battalions, and the Gecko would have been deployed at the regimental level a few kilometers behind that. Now, to be sure, they would have been backed up by longer-range systems like the SA-6, but as far as a Hawg driver was concerned, that would have been somebody else's problem. The Hawg was specifically designed to deal with this kind of threat because they were being developed and even entering service as it was being designed. So I think it's kind of interesting to see how it stacks up against them in DCS. Now, a quick word of warning. I'm going to take a look at how things work in DCS as it works today. I think you have to be careful about interpreting these results as if they are a simulation of what would have been or what might have been in real life. In my humble opinion, this is one area where the fidelity of DCS is actually not always all that high. Taking everything into account from how splash damage of ordnance is modeled, all the way to the fact that ground units can see through buildings, trees, and clouds, and even considering the fact that I gotta wonder just exactly how carefully things like radar and optical systems are really modeled in the game. It's a little dangerous to assume that DCS is providing any kind of prediction about how the matchup would have gone in real life. But it still is interesting to see how things work in the game and to take those results for what they're worth in terms of how to fly against these systems effectively when you're in the game. So let's quickly take a minute to talk about these three threats. Let's look at them both in terms of the range at which they can engage and in terms of the altitude at which they're effective. The Shilka was designed to provide short-range, low-level, very accurate autocannon fire at high volumes. It was radar-guided. It was a quad 23mm mount. It also included optical guidance mode, so the operator could track a target visually if he could see it. It was designed essentially to prevent strafing and low-level bombing attacks, which were more or less the close air support tactics of choice in the late 1960s, when the system was conceived and designed. At which job, by the way, it was exceptionally effective, as the Israeli Air Force discovered in 1973. In fact, if we talk about icons, which I tend to do a lot on this channel, the Shilka is what most people think of when you say Soviet tactical air defense, at least people have any picture in their mind when you say that. The Shilka was also very much in the minds of the designers of the A-10 when they required that the aircraft that they were designing be able to demonstrate high survivability and pilot protection to a cannon fire up to and including 23 millimeter rounds. Now, the SA-8 was very much designed to complement the Shilka, I think. It was designed to deny the airspace a few thousand meters above the ground within a few nautical miles of the front line, thus driving attack aircraft down into the waiting arms of the Shilkas. It was designed to be highly mobile. Both the radar and the launcher were on the same vehicle. It was designed specifically to move with forward assault elements and essentially deploy in moments from the line of march. As I said, the Soviet doctrine dictated that they were supposed to be deployed with the Motor Rifle Regiment headquarters, basically just behind the lead motor rifle battalions, a few kilometers away from the forward edge of battle area. There's not a lot of combat history on the SA-8. For instance, they were not present in 1973. Probably for the simple reason that they weren't really all that relevant in the very compressed airspace, either around the Suez Canal or the Golan Heights. Neither the Egyptians nor the Syrians really needed mobile short-range air defense systems that could move with their ground forces because they had the SA-6 systems that could provide overwatch. Now, apparently they were acquired post-1982 by the Syrians, and there is one reported downing of an F-4, an Israeli F-4, by an SA-8. Now, the SA-9 is the third leg of this triad, and it fits in between the Shilka and the Gecko. It's a fairly short range, shorter than the Gecko, but capable of engaging aircrafts at much higher altitude than the Shilka, for instance. It's also more agile in the sense that the acquisition doesn't require radar lock. The missile can basically be fired in the general direction of a heat signature. And the missile is fire and forget, so it doesn't have to be guided once it picks up that heat signature. The missile itself is actually just a version of a Manpad's portable missile. But again, it's mounted on a vehicle so that it can accompany the forward elements into battle and engage without the need to dismount. Because there were a lot of actual manned portable systems incorporated in the Soviet table of organization and equipment, but of course that would have meant getting out of your vehicle while you were charging towards the NATO front lines, which was not exactly a recipe for good health. By doctrine, the SA-9s were assigned at the motor rifle battalion level, just like the Shilkas, and they probably would have moved with probably the reserve company, maybe a kilometer, a bit more, behind the forward assault companies. And they basically would have been there to pick up any aircraft flying too low for the SA-8s to engage and too high for the Shilkas. And in particular, you would have expected that they would have been very effective against aircraft that were making pop-up maneuvers and using high thrust to do that, or executing high-speed egress. Either way, they would have presented nice, juicy IR signatures. Now, again, this was something that the A-10 designers clearly had in mind when they picked high bypass turbofan engines and mounted them high above the horizontal stabilizer to try and minimize their IR signatures. But in any way you take it, you can see that this triad was designed to present a truly formidable integrated multi-layered system of air defense for forward troops. Now, in this video, I don't intend to do a full-up tactical simulation of frontline air defense in a 1980s Warsaw Pact invasion scenario, mostly because that would involve the simulation of a lot more units, like dozens, maybe even hundreds more units, to really get the flavor of how the air defense assets would have been fit into a full motor rifle regiment on the attack. I might do that for a future video, but it's just going to take more work than I want to do right now. Instead, for this video, I'm just going to start by doing some work on the range, which none of you will find strange if you know this channel. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up scenarios where we attack each of the systems one at a time. Now, that's not realistic, and I'm not doing it because I'm claiming it's realistic, but it will help me learn what works and what doesn't, particularly in a controlled environment. I will also note that I understand that this is really a best case scenario for the pilot, because I will not only know exactly what I'm facing, but I'll know exactly where it's going to be. Neither of which things would be true in a tactical scenario. But the purpose here is not to prove that I can beat the threat. It's to find out what tactics work and what ones really definitely don't. So let's hop in the cockpit and go give this a try. Okay, here we are in the cockpit of my trusty A-10A. We've taken off from Kobuleti, heading east, and we've turned around. We're heading back west towards the coast. The target range is out there to the right. If you've watched any of the videos on my channel, you're probably familiar with the area. We've got a Shilka that is stationed at the basically the big main target on the range in the center of that 50-meter circle. And we're just, for this trial, we're just basically going to do the simplest thing we can do, which is we're going to come in at a fairly high level and we're going to bomb that Shilka. And of course, given that the Shilka is designed to defend against low-level attacks, we're not really expecting that this will be much of a problem. We will have to make sure that we don't get too low, though. Really, we want to try and stay above about 3,000 feet. So that shouldn't be much of a challenge, but it does require a little bit of technique to get bombs on target, even with the A-10 from that altitude. If you struggle with that, by the way, I do have another series on how to drop bombs in DCS, and that will certainly be a topic that we'll cover. You might want to check that out. So we'll point out also that the mission I'm flying is going to be available on my Discord server. It's basically a very simple mission using the range. The only thing that's different about it is that when you take off, you'll actually have a menu item that will let you choose which one of the threats you want to place on the range. So you can fly the mission over and over again, and you can decide whether to fly against a Shilka, an SA-8, or an SA-9. They'll always be placed in the middle of the range, though, so there's not really a whole lot of uncertainty about where you'll be dropping your bombs, but you can try various techniques against different targets. So here we're coming up the ranges to the right over there. We're just about ready to start our final approach to the roll-in. So you'll notice that with the Shilka, we're not getting any radar warnings. Shilka does have a radar. You probably won't hear from it until you get much closer to it. So we're just going to turn in. The target is going to be off our left. You can see that we're in air-to-ground mode now. And we're just going to roll in and try to get the bombs off somewhere around 4,000 feet. Finish our dive out at above 3,000 feet, and that should mean that we don't have any trouble at all from this ship. So we can see the target coming up there, just coming into view in front of the canopy, and it's just about time to roll in. We'll start shaping around a little bit here. It's good. Let's roll in, get that lift vector up to the target. We do want to roll out fairly quickly because we're not all that high. Okay, there you're hearing from the radar warning system now, but we're good and lined up. Just got to get the pipper on the target, and we do, and we're done, and that should be job done against that Shilka. We got a little lower than maybe we'd like at the end, but that's all she wrote for that threat. Okay, well that's pretty easy, but what if we're not facing a Shilka? What if we are facing an SA-8? And you can see now, same scenario, we've just taken off out of Kobuleti, but barely have we gotten turned around and started to get to altitude before the radar warning system is telling us that we have an SA-8 that we're facing this time. Now, I'm just going to use exactly the same strategy as I did the last time. But as you can probably imagine, that strategy is going to be, shall we say, maladapted to this threat. So once again, we're just climbing out over the coast. We're going to try to get above 6,000 feet, maybe up to 7,000 feet. Then we're going to turn north and head for the range. And for now, we're not really hearing very much from that SA-8. We know that the search radar is out there. We haven't yet gotten a tracking tone. We'll know we have a tracking tone when we get much higher repetition rate of those little pulses. And then, of course, when we get an alarm go off and a light appears on the up front there, we'll know that we actually have a missile in the air. We're a long way from that yet, but we won't be forever, I can guarantee you. And so, of course, the point of doing this is not to show that I'm not trying to demonstrate a technique that works against an SA-8. I'm really just trying to explore how close we can get to the SA-8 before we get into trouble at high level, and just sort of figure out, the parameters of things, and also, for the purposes of the video, to demonstrate why you can't just go in high into this threat environment and expect to be successful just because you can defeat a Shilka that way. Doesn't mean that you'll be able to operate in any kind of tactical environment where there are SA-8s and overwatch over the Shilkas, which is exactly what the SA-8, of course, was designed to do. So we're going to find out why we need to get down closer to the ground here in this environment. Let's just roll the tape forward a little bit. Okay, we've rolled the tape forward just a little bit. We're approaching the point where we would normally turn into the target, but you can hear that we definitely are hearing the tracking tone now. If you listen carefully, you can hear that in the background. It's a much more insistent and rapid beeping. So that means that the SA-8 has definitely seen us and is definitely tracking us. They have not decided yet to fire. There we have the missile launch warning, and so now it's time to release chaff and to get down and at least 90 degrees to the SAM. Preferably start getting away. We can see the missile coming for us. A second missile coming for us. Time to get down, time to run away. No, there was no bang. That's a good sign. We'll have a missile in the air though, but we do not seem to be in any danger from those two. Now, that's all well and good, but we can't get close enough to engage anything, and we'll prove that by we'll go back up again and try this approach again, and we're probably going to find that as soon as we get back hot, and once the SA-8 is able to pick us up again, it's probably going to re-engage, and we're going to be exactly the same situation. And there we are. SAM has reacquired us. We're still multiple nautical miles from the target, so if we're trying to climb up to do a high-altitude attack, we're going to run into exactly the same situation. It's probably going to launch on us again. And this time, if we don't take the same kind of dramatic evasive action, we're probably going to find that we are not going to have a positive outcome to this particular test. There's the target there. We'll still just try our luck. Nope, there's another missile launch, this time chaffing again, but I'm not maneuvering quite as dramatically, not getting low as fast, and we're going to find that that does not end well. Okay, so I guess we probably proved what we already knew, and that is that coming in at that kind of altitude against an SA-8 is a losing proposition. Now, mind you, he's only got 4 missiles. If we had really tried to evade those two, maybe we could have run him out of missiles and then we could have gone and attacked him. But I'm not sure that proves very much. In any real situation, there's going to be a platoon of 4 geckos, 16 missiles. I don't think that we're going to want to play cat and mouse until we run them out of ammo. I don't really think that's a winning strategy. So let's go take a look at another way of dealing with an SA-8. Okay, here we are. Same situation. We've just taken off from Pobletti. Discovered that we're facing an SA-8. This time, instead of going high, though, we're going to go low. So we're going to head out to the coast, we're going to get down low, and we're going to get increasingly lower, down below 500 feet eventually, to basically try and stay below the tracking threshold of the SA-8. But we'll still be able to see that the radar, we can see the radar, but the radar basically can't see us well enough, at least, to get a tracking tone if we stay low enough. See that as we go out here. And of course we expect that this will work.
Altitude, altitude.
Because the SA-8 is not designed to defend against this kind of threat. That's what the Shilka is there for. Okay, so I hear you say, so why are we trying this if it wouldn't work against a Shilka? We got to be able to defeat both kinds of threat. Well, let's just see. Let's first of all, let's prove to ourselves that we can make this work against the SA-8, and then we'll have to take a look at what we can do about making it work against the Shilka as well. You see there we lost the radar for a moment while we were behind the hill. We've gotten it back. Now we're coming out to the coast. Take a nice little turn here, getting lower and lower. Okay, that we still have the search indication there. You can see it's coming and going though. When it repeatedly That gives us that acquisition tone, having, you know, that we've acquired the radar. It means that it is coming in and out, which is kind of where we want it to be. So we're now down nice and low. Now we do have the luxury of knowing when we have to turn in to do our pop-up. That's one of the good things about working on the range. See, we've lost the radar entirely now, so bear a little bit to the left. And again, this would be much more challenging in a tactical environment, but we're not trying to fly completely tactically. We're trying to find essentially a profile that will work against this threat. So we're just going to stay low, then we're going to turn to the right, come across in front of the range, and at the appropriate moment we're going to pop up. If we do it right, we'll be able to look to the left, see the target, and roll in on it. Now I've gone to air-to-ground mode. I've still got the bomb pipper up, but I am going to switch to cannon. I just like to have the bomb pipper while I'm maneuvering. Just personal preference. Alright, here we go. Turning in. Stay low. Get ourselves lined up at right angles to the range. I don't want to pull up somewhere around the end of this tree line. We're not going to pop very high. We don't need to with the SA-8. We'll start looking for the target once we acquire the target. We've gone to cannon mode, and it's just going to be a question of seeing him. Okay, we hear him again, but there's no way he's going to track us at this distance, so this is basically a free pass. All we have to do is get him lined up, and he belongs to us. That's the end of one gecko. So, high-level approach strictly doesn't work with a gecko, but low-level approach is not really all that difficult, as long as we know where he is, haha. But that's a different problem that we'll have to solve. And it should not surprise us that that was not a particularly difficult engagement. This is, after all, what the Hawg was designed to do. It was designed to engage armored vehicles with its cannon and dispose of them with extreme prejudice. Now, of course, the thing that's going to make that a little bit more challenging is our old friend the Shilka, who was designed to keep us from doing exactly that. So having proven that if there are any SAMs in the area, that a high-level approach is just not going to be something that works, and that we are going to be using low-level pop-up tactics with the A-10, which shouldn't have surprised us. So now the question is, can we make that work against the Shilka? And the answer is yes. If we're careful about it. So let's, there are right ways of doing it and wrong ways of doing it. And let's start by looking at the wrong way to do it. And so we can see what we need to avoid if we want to do this successfully. Okay, here we are back doing a low-level run. This time our target is a Shilka, though. And same thing, we're going to turn to the right, and then we're going to go in, and we're going to do the same kind of pop-up attack that we did the last time. There's going to be a couple of problems with that approach, though. We're going to do a low pop. We're going to do it at not a long distance, but a fair distance from the target. And this is going to do two things that won't help us. It's going to mean that we're not that high. The target is going to pick us up quickly, and we're going to be lined up heading straight at the target for quite a while, which is going to give him lots of time to get us lined up, because it does, as the saying goes, it solves all of his angle problems, because we're pointed directly at him while we're trying to get him lined up in our sights. And basically, if we don't do it right, he's going to win the race, and we're going to lose this gunfight. So we're popping up. We're still a ways back from the target. We're doing a low pop, but it's not very aggressive. So we're not maneuvering hard. We're not giving him a hard problem to solve. We're also giving him lots of time to see us coming. As we popped well away from the target, we're rolling in reasonably leisurely, just like we did with the SA-8. Didn't matter with the SA-8, but it's going to matter here. Taking our time to get ourselves lined up. He's tracking us this whole time. You can see we've got a radar from him now. We're taking our time getting lined up, closing the range. By the time we start firing, he's got a firing solution, and we're basically going to have to call that one a draw. Even though we get a Shilka, we're probably not going to get home to brag about it. Okay, so what do? We can't go high if there are any geckos in the area. It seems like we can't go low if there's Shilkas around. What do we do? Well, it's actually not true that we can't go low. We just have to be much more careful about how we do the pop-up. So let's do that again, and let's change our pop-up profile. We don't need to change it much. We just need to be aware of a couple of things. Basically, what it amounts to is that we have to make sure that we pop up quite a bit more aggressively, get a little bit higher, but we also need to be doing this closer to the target. In a strange way, that may sound funny, but we want to be closer to him. His angle problems are harder to solve the closer we are to him, because the faster we're moving across his field of view. And it also means that we'll get lined up and we'll be in range a lot faster, so we're going to give him a lot less time to solve his aiming problem while we're solving ours. If we do it right and we're good at it, we're going to solve our aiming problem first, and he's going to lose. So here we go, a bit more aggressive pop-up. So we're changing our angles faster, we're shifting around even just a little bit, we're not flying straight and level, we're looking for the target. As soon as we look like we're going to have a solution on the target, we're already starting to roll in, we're not flying straight and level at any point, we're a little bit higher, so we're able to pick him up a little quicker. And in the end, we're going to engage him at a longer range than we did the last time, because we get on target faster. And once our rounds are on the way, we just have to hope he doesn't shoot back, which he doesn't. And basically, we take out a Shilka. Okay, even though the stall horn was on there because we were maneuvering pretty aggressively, we didn't take any shots from the Shilka, we didn't take any damage. So we have proven that Shilkas are not invincible at low level. So we know we can take out a Gecko at low level without a problem. We know if we're doing things right, we can take out Shilkas as well. The trick is not to give them a good shot. Particularly, don't take a lot of time lining up your shot. Don't fly straight and level if you can avoid it ever, if you're really above treetop level. So now the question is, what does the Gaskin add to this whole question? And when, what tactics are effective against the Gaskin, and where is it effective against us? So with the Shilka and the Gecko, we have focused on the altitude of the attack and the format of the attack. With the Gaskin, it turns out we need to focus on countermeasures. In point of fact, the Gaskin is actually effective against both of the types of attacks we have just used if we don't use countermeasures. So let me just show you what will happen if you try to attack a Gaskin from a high level. So we're just running in a sort of standard high-level approach like we did successfully with the Shilka and unsuccessfully against the Gecko. Now, because we haven't got any radar warnings, we might think that this is a safe altitude. If we were flying against a Shilka, it would be. But what we're going to find out is that that's really the thing that the Gaskin brings to the party, is that although it's not long range, it is capable of engaging you at much higher altitudes than the Shilka. So you might have a lot of Shilkas running around the front lines. If you have a couple of Gaskins in there in Overwatch, you're not going to be able to operate at altitude, even if you have disposed of all of the Geckos. Because what we're going to find is if there are Gaskins about, and of course we get no notification because they don't use radar, we're going to find that they are certainly able to reach out and touch us at an altitude where we would be quite safe from the Shilkas. Now, the one thing we're not going to do on this run is we're not going to do any flaring at all. Not going to use countermeasures, and we're going to find out what a difference that makes soon. So here we are. Looks like a nice routine everyday run into the target. We've got a good line on the target. We're rolling in on it. We are just having a nice relaxed Hawg dive bombing day, getting lined up on the target. Got a Pipper, we just need to get it over the target and everything is going to be fine until, oops, what is that white line coming towards us? Ah, that's not good.
Pull up.
So once again, we may have gotten the target. Looked like a pretty good clean drop, but that's not going to help us very much because we certainly aren't going to get to brag about it. So again, the very definition of a Pyrrhic victory. So dropping on a Gaskin from height, that's the result you get. And you'll have to take my word for it that you get pretty much the same result if you drop on a Gaskin from in a pop-up attack. You will still also find that he has plenty of time to get his missiles off before you have a chance to get him with the gun. I'm not going to bother going through that. We've done that a couple of times. But let me show you what a difference you get if you actually use countermeasures. So we're just going to redo that exactly the same attack again, but this time we're going to flare consistently as we come into the target area. Okay, so here we are approaching the target again. The only difference in our approach this time is that we are now releasing flares as we roll in. Pick up the target. We've got the flares going in automatic mode, so they're coming out every couple of seconds. We're not worrying about it. The system is taking care of flaring for us. We're focusing on getting that target because none of this is going to be worthwhile if we don't hit it. Now there goes the missile. You can see it's underneath because it's aimed at the flare behind us. There goes the second one also behind us. And just going back and forth here. You can see the flares there. The third missile coming up. We're just jinking to give lots of separation between our flares and ourselves. And it looks like that is it for our Gaskin. He got off at least 3 missiles, and not one of them actually came all that close. So, whether or not that's realistic, certainly in DCS, the A-10 is a difficult target, at least for an early IR missile like the SA-9 to hit. So, if you're in an A-10 and you're above a couple hundred feet, you want to be dispensing flares. I think they really are a lifeline. So, just to prove the point and finish things off, let's actually do one more attack. We'll take on an SA-9 this time, but in a pop-up attack, because we basically decided that pop-up attacks are probably the way we want to go. And let's just prove that if we use countermeasures appropriately, we can also stay safe from SA-9s in pop-up mode. Okay, here we are turning in from the coast, just getting ready to start our pop-up maneuver. Get leveled out. Once we get leveled out, we'll go to guns. We'll start the pop-up right about where the trees run out there. Guns. Now we're going to start the pop-up, good aggressive pop-up like we did with Chilka, but now we're also flaring, and we're flaring, and we're flaring. And same as we did each of the other times, pick up the target, try and roll in quickly, try and get lined up. See what he has to say about all of that. No response so far. There we go. Oh, there's one missile headed for a flare. There's the second one coming a little bit closer. It'd be good if we finished them off here. Kind of ugly.
Pull up, pull up.
All right, not my best cannon run, but still, even with a fairly lousy cannon run, we stayed safe because of the flares. So, Mr. Gaskin is gone, and we are safe. So I hope you enjoyed that little video with some runs pitting the Hawg against its natural opponents. I guess the net, as they would say, of all of that is. If you're up against a Shilka, bomb it if you can, shoot it if you have to. If you're up against a Gecko, shoot it for sure. And if you're up against a Gaskin, it doesn't really matter, but bring lots of flares. Either way, I think you can design effective tactics for any one of those threats, but you are going to have to bring your A game, I think. They're not pushovers. And certainly in a situation where you didn't know exactly where they were, you didn't know exactly what you were up against, it would be a lot more challenging. But there are tactics that will work. I hope you enjoyed that. I'd be really happy if anybody wants to download the mission from my Discord server and give it a try yourself. Let me know what works for you. And for now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.